Blade Runner 2049 is one of my favourite films of all time. I know, it's a bit quick to say that, seeing as it has only been in existence for a few short years, but it is damn near perfection for me. Intelligent, engaging, tense, beautifully shot, wonderfully acted. But it's not without its flaws. Spoilers ahead for the entire film, so if you're watching this video before seeing the film, don't. Now that they've all gone to experience a miracle, let's get to those problems. One flaw that people like to engage in discourse about is that the film is overtly sexist and misogynistic. This was a fairly common criticism when the film came out and continues to be so to this day. So, is Blade Runner 2049 sexist? Yes. And therefore, no. I'm Rustin Charmaine, and this is a sort of half-assed series where I ramble on for 1,000 words about something or other. In her article for Vice entitled Why Blade Runner 2049 is a Misogynistic Mess, Charlotte Gush wrote her tagline as, "Women in the sci-fi sequel are either prostitutes, holographic housewives, or they die brutal deaths that we are forced to watch in horrifying detail." Everything she says there is correct. The deaths referenced in the article are those of Love, portrayed by Sylvia Hertz, and Lieutenant Joshi, portrayed by Robin Wright. These deaths are indeed graphic and are lingered on longer than many of the other deaths in the film, but both, I would argue, have a narrative purpose in doing so. Love serves as the primary antagonist of the film. Jared Leto's Neander Wallace is the big boss, sure, but Love is the dangerous killer who drives the plot forward for the bad guys. So, when she kills Joshi, the brutality is amplified to communicate her psychopathy. Can a replicant be a psychopath? I suppose if they were programmed to feel empathy and she doesn't, that's a different video. Yes, that death scene is drawn out and strikingly cold and sadistic. This is done to set Love up as a dangerous and remorseless killer, one that our protagonist should fear. Love's own death is similarly horrifying, but that's because she was the primary villain of the piece. I don't feel that the gender of either of these characters is relevant to any of this. Had they both been male, it would have been presented in largely the same way. But what of the rest of that criticism? That women outside of the aforementioned characters are largely represented as prostitutes or housewives. Yes, that is true, and it is sexist. But Charlotte's article, and I'm not just picking on her here, there were loads of these, but hers was the best written of the ones that I found. Charlotte's article levels these criticisms at Denis Villeneuve and those involved with the production of the film, rather than at the fictional world in which it is set. This is fundamentally misguided. The Los Angeles of 2049 depicted in this film is a horrific place. Widespread famine and poverty, rampant racism, assuming you count replicants as a race, perhaps they're more of a species. Either way, rampant allegorical racism and, indeed, sexism. I'm surprised that articles in this vein don't more commonly bring up the scene in which hordes of scantily clad replicant women are literally thrown into a room with stained glass windows for mass fucking. That, for me, is the most visceral depiction of misogyny in the film. Although probably the most institutionalized of the sexism is the existence of Joy, the AI housewife portrayed wonderfully by Ana de Armas. Experience Joy. Everything you want to see, everything you want to hear. If that marketing slogan makes your skin crawl, then it did a good job. It was designed to. Within the world of the film, it's supposed to inspire lonely, pathetic men to purchase a subservient woman who can literally never leave their kitchen. In our world, it's supposed to drive home just how shitty of a place and time this would be to call home. That's the point of writing your world as a dystopia. This isn't an idealized version of what humanity could become. This is a condemnation of what we could easily let ourselves slip into. Hampton Fancher and Michael Green wrote this version of California to epitomize everything that is wrong with human society. A world mostly turned to rubble and dust, where people live in the crowded corridors of run-down apartment buildings, and children grow up constructing parts for ships in giant slave houses claiming to be orphanages. Of course this world contains rampant misogyny, how could it not? If you left this film feeling that women were unfairly depicted, you were supposed to. That's a pretty obvious part of the subtext of the film. So, yes and no. This world is sexist, and so therefore, the film is not. Were this presented as a utopia, and women were only there to cook, clean and be fucked, then that would absolutely mean we are watching the work of a misogynist. But, seeing as this is a world featuring pretty much all of the awful things that humanity do to one another, then excluding sexism would be wrong. Indeed, one could argue that to have this world feature balanced gender politics would be the sexist avenue. as that would imply that a world where we are judged solely on relevant merit rather than which genitalia we happen to have been born with would be a horrible place to live. Blade Runner 2049 is sexist, and in being so, displays how its creators are not. Also, physical gender is completely irrelevant for anything other than medical issues, so this argument is completely pointless. You could gender flip every single character in the film and the plot wouldn't change in the slightest. Goodbye.